what I was playing, Lane.
I didn't think it'd like to listen, sir.
I'm sorry for that, for your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
Oh, by the way, Lane, I see from your book that on Thursday night when Lord Shorman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of wine, sir. I've often observed that in married households, champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens! Is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I've had very little experience of it with it myself up to the present. I've only been married once, and that was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't know that I am much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir, it is not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I am sure. That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem, as a class, to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthy.
How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algie.
I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
Oh, in the country.
What on earth do you do there?
My dear fellow, when one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are the people you amuse?
Oh, neighbors, neighbors.
You got nice neighbors in your part of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Yes, Shropshire. Of course. Hello. Why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who is coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolyn.
How perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all very well, but I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolyn is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolyn flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolyn. I have come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you had come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
I really don't see anything romantic in proposing. It is very romantic to be in love, but there is nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted. One usually is, I believe, and then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If I ever get married, I'll certainly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt about that, dear Algie. The divorce courts were specially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
Oh, there is no use speculating on that subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They are ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you have been eating them this whole time.
That is quite a different matter. She is my aunt. Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn is devoted to bread and butter.
Very good bread and butter it is, too.
Well, my dear fellow, you need not eat as if you're going to eat at all. You behave as if you are married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
Well, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It is a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary numbers of bachelors one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolyn is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, you will have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What do you mean, Algie? What do you mean, Algie, by Cecily? I don't know anyone by the name of Cecily.
Bring me that cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to tell me you've had my cigarette case this whole time? I wish to goodness you had let me know. I had been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
Well, there's no good offering a reward until the thing is found.
I think that is rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, it makes no matter, for now that I look at the inscription inside, I find that the thing isn't yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times, and you've no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly-like thing to read what is written inside a private cigarette case.
Oh, it is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I am well aware of that fact, and I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing one does in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily, and you said you don't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes. Charming lady she is too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algie.
But why does she call herself Little Cecily if she's your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. Surely it does matter that every aunt should be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think as if every aunt should be exactly as your aunt is. That is absurd. For heaven's sake, give me back my cigarette case.
Yes, but why does your aunt call you her uncle? From Little Cecily with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. But why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It is Earnest.
It isn't Ernest. It's Jack.
I have always known you to be Earnest. I have introduced you to everyone as Earnest. You answered the name of Ernest. You look as if your name is Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking person I ever saw in my life. It is perfectly absurd you're saying your name isn't Ernest. It's on your cards. Here's one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B for the Albany. I'll keep this as a proof that your name is Ernest if ever you attempt to deny it to me, or to Gwendolyn, or to anybody else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country, and the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, calls you her dear uncle. Come, old boy, you had much better have the thing out at once.
My dear fellow, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It is very vulgar to talk like a dentist. When one isn't a dentist, it produces a false impression.
Well, that is exactly what dentists always do. Now, go on. Tell me the whole thing. I may mention I've always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I'm quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now produce your explanation and pray make it improbable.
My dear fellow, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, It is perfectly ordinary. The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a small boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, a Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as uncle, for motives of respect that you cannot possibly appreciate, lives in my place in the country under the admirable tutelage of her governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
That's nothing to you, dear boy. You are not to be invited. But I can tell you quite candidly, the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that, my dear fellow. I have Bunburyed all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now, go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, I don't know whether you can fully grasp my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. When one is placed in the position of guardian, one must adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It is one's duty to do so. And as a very high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very well to one's health or to one's happiness, in order to get up to town, I've always pretended to have a younger brother by the name of Earnest, who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful of scrapes. That, my dear Algy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't at all be a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. You really should leave that to people who haven't been at a university. They do it so well in the daily papers. What you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you were a Bunburyist. You are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Earnest in order that you may be able to come up to town as often as you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury in order that I may be able to go down into town, or I may be able to go down into the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you at Willis's tonight, for I have really been engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
No, you are absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It is very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving invitations.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dined there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I am always treated as a member of the family and sent down with either no woman at all or 2. In the third place, I know perfectly well whom she will place me next to tonight. She will place me next Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. That is not very pleasant. Indeed, it's not even decent. That sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It is simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you being confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunbury. I want to tell you the rules.
I am not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolyn accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. In fact, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily's a little too much interested in him. So I'm going to get rid of Ernest, and I strongly advise you do the same with your invalid friend with the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury, and if you ever get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you will be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time.
Well, that is nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolyn, and indeed, she's the only girl in my life that I ever thought that I would marry, I certainly wouldn't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to realize that in married life, 3 is company, and 2 is not.
That, my dear fellow, is the theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and that the happy English home has proved in half the time.
For heaven's sake, Don't be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
Oh, it isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. I do wonder when Aunt Augusta will arrive. Ah, that must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or predators ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I get her out of the way for 10 minutes, so that you can have an opportunity for proposing to Gwendolyn, may I ask, may you dine with me at Willis's tonight?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. It is so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, Algernon. I hope you're behaving very well.
I'm feeling quite well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing, Algernon. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart. Am I not, Mr. Worthing?
You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I am not that. It would leave no room for developments, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we are a bit late, Algernon. I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been down there since her poor husband's funeral. I've never seen a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now, I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Gwendolyn, won't you come sit here?
Thanks, Mama. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens! Lane, why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Aunt Augusta, I am greatly distressed about there being no cucumbers. Not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets earlier with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has, although from what cause, I, of course, cannot say. Thank you. I've quite the treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to set you down with Mary Farquhar at dinner. She is such a nice woman and so attentive to her husband. It is delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I certainly hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your poor uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say, a terrible disappointment to me. But the fact is, I have just had a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I think it is high time that this Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he's going to live or to die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd, nor do I, in any sense, approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I'm always telling that to your poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice. As far as any improvement in his ailment goes, anyway. I would be much obliged if you would tell Mr. Bunbury from me to be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season when everyone has said pretty much all that they had to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I'll speak with Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious. And I think I can promise you he'll be all right by Saturday. Although, of course, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people don't listen. And if one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I'll run over the program I've drawn out, if you will kindly come into the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. It is very kind of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. Most people seem to think them improper, and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. German, though, sounds to me a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed, I believe, is so. Gwendolyn, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mom.
A charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people do that, I always feel quite certain they mean something else, and that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I'm never wrong.
And I would like to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mama has a way of coming back into a room suddenly that I've often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any girl I have ever met since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite well aware of the fact. I often wish that in public at any rate you had been more demonstrative. To me, you have always been an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly being mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines. It's reached the provincial pulpits, I have told. And my ideal has always been to love a man with the name Earnest. Something in that name inspires absolute confidence. From the moment Algernon first mentioned to me he had a friend named Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
Do you really love me, Gwendolyn?
Passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Earnest.
But you don't mean to tell me that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Earnest.
But your name is Earnest.
Yes, I know. But what if it wasn't? Do you mean to tell me that you couldn't love me then?
Ah, this is merely a metaphysical speculation. And like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Well, personally, darling, I don't much care for the name of Earnest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolyn, I think there are a lot of other much nicer names out there. I think Jack, for instance, is a charming name.
Jack? No. There is very little music in the name of Jack, if any at all indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I've known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity a woman married to a man named John. She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Earnest.
Gwendolyn, I must be christened at once. I mean, we must be married at once. There's no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing.
Well, surely. You know that I love you, and you've led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you are not absolutely indifferent toward me.
I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched upon.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I find it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Dear Gwendolyn,
Yes, Mr. Worthing, what have you got to say to me?
you know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long have you been about it? I'm afraid you've had very little practice in how to propose.
My own one. I have never loved any in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderful brown eyes you have, Ernest. They're quite brown. I hope you will always look at me just like that. Especially when other people are present.
Mr. Worthing! Rise, sir, from that semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mama! I must beg you to retire! This is no place for you! Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finish what, may I ask?
I'm engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mama.
Pardon me, you're not engaged to be married to anyone. When you do become engaged, either I or Lord Bracknell, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come upon a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant, as the case may be. It is hardly a thing that she would be allowed to arrange for herself. And now, I have a few questions, but to you, Mr. Worthing. While I'm making these inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait for me below, in the carriage.
Mama!
In the carriage, Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn, the carriage!
Yes, Mama.
You can take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men. Although, I do have the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I'm not opposed to entering your name, should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit that I smoke.
I'm glad to hear it. A man should always have a pastime of some sort. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. Now, I've always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I am pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touch it and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no results whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious issue to the upper classes and probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is not unsatisfactory. What between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted of one after one's death, land has ceased to become either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That's all that can be said about land.
I have a country house, of course, with some land attached to it. About 1,500 acres, I believe. But I don't rely on that for my real income. In fact, as far as I can make out, the poachers are the only people who make anything of it.
A country house. How many bedrooms? Oh, well, that point can be cleared up afterward. You have a townhouse as well, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature such as Gwendolyn could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
I have a house on Belgrave Square, but it is let by the year to a Lady Bloxham. I can have it back whenever I like, at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham. I don't know her.
Oh, she goes about very little. She's a lady considerably advanced in years.
Ah, nowadays that is no guarantee of respectability of character. What's number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I knew there was something. However, that can easily be altered.
The fashion or the sign?
Both, if necessary, I presume.
What are your politics?
Well, I'm afraid I really have none. I'm a liberal unionist.
Oh, they count as Tories. They dine with us. Or come in the evening at any rate. Now, on to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both seems like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born into what the radical papers call the purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
To tell you the truth, Lady Bracknell, I don't know. When I said I had lost my parents, it might be closer to the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found!
The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, a gentleman of a very charitable and kindly disposition, found me when I was a baby and gave me the name of Worthing, because he had a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It's a seaside resort.
And where did the charitable gentleman with a first-class ticket to this seaside resort find?
In a handbag.
A handbag!
Yes, Lady Bracknell, a handbag. A somewhat large, brown handbag with handles to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
And in what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew find this ordinary handbag?
The cloakroom at Victoria Station.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station.
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial, Mr. Worthing. I confess I am somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred in a handbag, seems to bring to mind some of the worst excesses of the French Revolution, and I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station might serve to conceal some sort of social indiscretion. Has probably been used for that purpose in the past, but is by no means a reasonable basis for a dignified position in good society.
May I ask then what you would advise me to do? I need not say I would do anything to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to secure at any rate one parent before the season is quite up.
Well, I don't know how I could possibly do that. I could produce the handbag at any moment. It's in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it to do with me? You can hardly imagine that Lord Bracknell and I would allow our only daughter, a girl raised with the utmost sophistication and grace, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning. For goodness sake, Algie, don't play that ghastly tune. How idiotic are you?
Didn't it go all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you? I know it is a way she has. She is always refusing people. I think it is most ill-natured of her.
Oh, Gwendolyn is right as a trivet. As far as she is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. Indeed, I don't quite know what a gorgon is, but I'm quite sure that Lady Bracknell is one. In any case, she's a monster, helping a myth, which is rather unfair. I'm sorry, Algie. I guess I shouldn't talk that way about your own aunt in front of you.
My dear boy, I love hearing my relations abused. It's the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't got the remotest knowledge of how to live, nor the smallest instinct about when to die.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't.
Well, I won't argue about it with you. You always want to argue about things.
Well, that is exactly what things were originally made for.
Good heavens, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself. Say, Algie, You don't think there's any way of Gwendolyn becoming like her mother in about 150 years, do you?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That's his.
Is that clever?
It is perfectly phrased, and quite as true as any observation in civilized life should be.
I am sick to death of cleverness. Everyone is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without running into clever people. It has become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had a few fools left.
We have.
I should extremely like to meet them. What on earth do they talk about?
The fools? Oh, about the clever people, of course.
What fools?
By the way, did you tell Gwendolyn the truth about your being Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, the truth isn't quite the sort of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl like Gwendolyn. What extraordinary ideas you have about how to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she is pretty, and to someone else if she is plain.
Oh, that is nonsense.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Earnest?
Oh, by the end of the week I shall have gotten rid of him. I'll say he died abroad of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy, don't they? Quite suddenly.
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow. It's the sort of thing that runs in families. You would much better say a severe chill.
You're sure a severe chill isn't hereditary or anything of that kind?
Of course it isn't.
Well, that settles it then. My brother Ernest was carried off in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
But I thought you said that Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother Ernest. Won't she feel his loss a good deal?
Oh, Cecily is not a silly, romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She has a capital appetite, goes on long walks, and pays absolutely no attention to her lessons.
I would rather like to see Cecily.
I shall take very good care that you never do. She is excessively pretty, and only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolyn yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18?
Oh, one doesn't blurt these things out to people. Bet you anything you like. Half hour after Gwendolyn and Cecily have met, they'll be calling each other sister.
Women only do that after they have called each other many other things first. Now, if we want to get a good table at Willis's, we really must go and dress. Do you know, 'tis nearly 7.
Oh, it is always nearly 7.
Well, I'm hungry.
Never knew you when you weren't.
What shall we do after dinner? Go to a theater?
No, I loathe listening.
Well, let us go to the club?
No, I hate talking.
Well, we might try around to the Empire at 10.
No, can't bear looking at things. It seems so silly.
Well, what shall we do?
Nothing.
It is awfully hard work doing nothing. However, I don't mind hard work where there is no definite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolyn, upon my word.
Algie, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolyn, I don't think I can allow this at all.
Algie, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You're not quite old enough to do that yet.
Dearest Gwendolyn.
Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mama's face, I fear we never shall. Very few parents nowadays pay any regards to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Any influence I've had over Mama, I lost at the age of 3. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else and marry often, nothing she can do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
My own darling.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mama with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name holds an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address in the Albany, I have. But what is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
There is a good postal service, I suppose. It may become necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
My own one.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algie, you may turn around now.
Thanks, I've turned around already.
You may also ring the bell.
You will let me see you to your carriage, my own darling.
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going Bunburying.
Yes, sir.
I shall probably not be back till Monday. You can put up my dress clothes, my smoking jacket, and all the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you're a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
There goes a sensible, intellectual girl. The only girl I ever cared for in my life. What on earth are you so amused at?
Oh, I'm just a little anxious about poor Bunbury, that is all.
If you don't take care, your friend Bunbury will get you into a serious scrape someday.
I love scrapes. They're the only things that are never serious.
Well, that is nonsense. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Nobody